All right, so we're now going to look at what statistically significant actually means. And first we need to look at a definition of significance level. And the symbol we use for this is alpha. And it's also, in addition to being called the significance level, it's sometimes called the alpha risk. And what this is a value chosen in a situation and that is chosen before we do our sampling, so ahead of time, and we then compare our p-value to. So in other words, we were talking about p-values being small or large. Well, how do you decide what is small or large? And it is always going to be situational. If this is work that's being done for an organization or for whoever's wanting the work done, the analysis done, they will have to decide how, what value they want their significance level to be. So if the p-value is smaller than alpha, smaller than the significance level, we say that the data are statistically significant at the level alpha. So that's if it's smaller than alpha. In that case, we reject the null hypothesis and conclude there is convincing evidence in favor of the alternative. Okay. And then, of course, if the p-value is larger than alpha, we say that we can't reject the null hypothesis. Okay. So, if we choose alpha to be equal to 0.05, we are requiring that the data give evidence against H0 so strong that it would happen less than 5% of the time just by chance when H0 is true. So we then want to know what would a significance of value of 0.01 mean. So here we would be expecting even stronger evidence. Than the 0.05. Against the null hypothesis. A result that would occur just 1% of the time over the long run. There's that term again, over the long run, if H0, the null hypothesis, was true. So if the p-value is less than alpha, then our data are statistically significant at level alpha, If so, we can reject H0 and state that there is is convincing evidence in favor of HA, the alternative hypothesis. Now, one thing I'd like you to note, significant in this case does not mean important. What it does mean is that it's not likely to happen only by chance. Okay, we're now going to look at type 1 and 2 errors. So if we reject, so we have a few cases, as you can see in the box. We could have the case where H0 is true, and then we will either reject or fail to reject it. Or H0 could be false, and perhaps HA is true, in which case we could reject or fail H0 as well. So if we reject H0 when H0 is actually true, we have committed a type 1 error. And if we fail to reject H0 when H0 is false, we have committed a type 2 error. And for the other two things, for now, we're just going to put smiley faces, because that's where we would expect that if H0 is false, we would hope to be able to reject it. If it was true, we don't want to reject it. We want to fail to reject it. So in our next example, a potato chip producer and its main supplier agree that each shipment of potatoes must meet certain quality standards. If the producer determines that more than 8% of the potatoes in the shipment have blemishes, the truck will be sent away to get another load of potatoes from the supplier. Otherwise, the entire truckload of potatoes will be used to make potato chips. To make a decision, a supervisor will inspect a random sample of potatoes from the shipment. The producer will then perform a significance test using the hypotheses. So H0 is P equals 0.08, and HA is P is greater than 0.08. So where P is the actual proportion of potatoes with blemishes in a given truckload. So describe a type 1 and type 2 error in this setting and explain the consequences of each. So a type 1 error that there is 8% or less of the potatoes have blemishes, but truckload is rejected. So what could be a problem with that? What are the consequences? Well, one consequence is that it takes time to get a new batch, which means it could delay production. So that could be a cost to the producer, and it might also be a cost to the supplier, especially if, at the very least, in terms of having to go and find some more, or if they can't supply, then they lose that shipment altogether. A type 2 error is that there is more than an 8% of the shipload having blemishes, but we accept it anyways. In other words, we failed to reject. And in this case, they'll produce potato chips with with blemishes. So produce more chips with blemishes. And they could then end up with customers who are dissatisfied. Dissatisfied. Excuse my spelling on that one. Okay, so at this point, I'd like you to give the homework a try. You've got page 547, 1 to 25 odds, multiple choice 27 to 30. In our next video, which will be coming up soon, probability of type 1 and 2 errors, and testing a claim. All right, that's it.